I put out the call for questions and you guys delivered. Thank you so much to everyone who answered or gave me a question in that thread I put up in the YouTube community. Thank you to everyone that submitted questions on my last Q&A video. And it seems like there's a lot of discussion around rotation, even though we're quite a ways away from rotation. I also recently put out a rotation FAQ video. You can see the thumbnail for it here. I'll put the video link in the description. Tons of views on that already. Again, thank you to everybody who watched that video so far. And if you're going to go watch it, thank you for checking it out. I hope it helps. I tried to answer as many questions about rotation as I could. And we've got a couple more here, as well as some other questions in and around the Pokemon trading card game. I'm Jet from inthirdperson.com. Make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and let's answer some of your questions. Before we get into this video, quickly wanted to let you know that I am fundraising for Extra Life. 100% of the proceeds go towards the Children's Miracle Network of Hospitals, a network of 170 hospitals taking care of thousands of kids every day. If you're interested in making a donation, you can see the link right here. The link is also in the description of this YouTube video. And if you donate towards my campaign at one of the incentive tiers, the reward tiers, you can get a signed Pokemon card from me, as well as 4x6-inch prints of my spray paint art. And this year's prints, I've got the original prints here. I'm going to shrink them down so that I can mail them out. We've got this, I like to call this the Moonlight Shuriken Greninja. We've got the Mewtwo here. We also have a Super Mario spray paint art print, as well as a bonus cloudy nighttime sky print. So if you're interested in supporting a wonderful cause and getting some cool rewards from me, link below, as well as link in the description of this video. Now let's get back into it. This one comes from Solmasaurus3320, who asks, do you think they will reprint cards like Double Turbo Energy, Pokestop, and Dark Patch, which are so big in the meta right now, but will be unavailable out when F-Stamp cards rotate out of format? Radiant Pokemon and V Pokemon have some pretty decent alternatives already, but Double Turbo Energy, for example, stands alone. So if you're not familiar with what rotation is, I actually put up a whole FAQ video. I'll put the thumbnail over here. Link to that is going to be in the description. But in short, once a year, the oldest cards that are legal for tournament play are removed from tournament play. And the person who asked the question has cited a couple of cards that are really important right now to the game that are going away. And when cards go away, sometimes they come back, sometimes they don't, and sometimes they come back in a nerfed form. I think one of my favorite examples in recent memory was Path to the Peak. This was the best stadium in the Sword and Shield era. Incredibly powerful, shutting off Rulebox Pokemon's abilities. And I thought, like, if there was any stadium that I thought was worthy of getting a reprint in the Scarlet and Violet era, it was Path to the Peak, to prevent Rulebox ability decks from just running away with the game. And it kind of did come back, it kind of didn't. Path to the Peak as a stadium is not legal anymore, but that exact ability exists, well, almost exact ability exists on Iron Thorns EX, which is basically the same thing, except it doesn't shut off other future Pokemon. And in a lot of ways, this is a lot worse. Iron Thorns is way harder to plug into most decks. For the most part, it basically just works as its own deck. But Iron Thorns, even so, was able to win the World Championships this year, which might go to show how powerful that ability on Path to the Peak was for its time, and they've kind of toned it down and brought it to just one Pokemon. Another great example of stuff coming back in ways that maybe is worse, and that's by design, is Battle VIP Pass, where this was such a strong card. If you got this at the beginning of the game, you got to bench 2 basic Pokemon, and this was incredibly powerful. A lot of decks were running 4 copies of this because it helped you assure that you could get an amazing start on the game, and that was oftentimes what you needed to win. And there was no clear Battle VIP Pass replacement when that rotated until we got Buddy Buddy Puffin, where it let you search your deck for 2 basic Pokemon and put them on your bench, but they had to be 70 HP or less. And now it's better in the sense that you could use this throughout the game, but limiting it to Pokemon with 70 HP or less pretty much limit it to evolution decks versus big basic decks, which really loved the Battle VIP Pass at the time. So these sort of functions came back, sort of, kind of, but not in the same way that we saw them before. And Dark Patch, before Dark Patch, there was Metal Saucer, and this was a way to accelerate Metal Energy, which this was also a riff on Dark Patch, which was originally released in 2012. And during the Sword and Shield era, Metal Saucer was pretty much the only way to accelerate extra Metal Energy. And when Saucer rotated out, people had questions of like, well, how do we accelerate energy to our Metal Pokemon? And the answer is, we didn't. We had no extra energy acceleration for a whole year until Metang showed up, and that became the de facto extra metal energy acceleration. But there is no hard and fast rule that the Pokemon Company is going to take an existing mechanic or function and then bring it back in some capacity going forward. Sometimes they bring it back as a nerf thing. Sometimes they bring it back 10 years from now. Sometimes it just never comes back. So you can't just look at the game right now in its current state and assume it's going to stay that way or build on top of itself forever, because they cut stuff out all the time. So to your specific points on those 3 cards, are we going to get a double turbo energy back? Double turbo energy in and of itself is a nerfed version of double colorless energy, because you get that minus 20 damage. And maybe even so, the Pokemon Company wants to look at that and find a different way of doing it. And one of those ways might be Crispin, where you technically get to accelerate 2 energy in 1 turn. You have to have 2 different types of energy in your deck. So this isn't going to work for everything, but technically it is a way of getting 2 energy onto your Pokemon in 1 go. And maybe that's the alternative. Maybe it's Neo Upper Energy, which I don't have a graphic for, but maybe I'll post it over here. I never know where to point. It's a whole thing. Neo Upper Energy is double energy, but it only works on stage 2s. And maybe they felt like double turbo energy is too powerful, so we're just gonna roll with this one for now. I don't know exactly. I'm not in the heads of Big Pikachu, but just because these cards are going away doesn't necessarily mean we're gonna get straight up 1-to-1 equivalents. Pokestop's an even weirder one, where that's a fantastic card. Maybe the Pokemon Company's like, hey, you guys are fine with Cycling Road, right? Where you just get to discard the basic energy card and you get to draw a card. I know this is kind of more of a Radiant Greninja alternative that everyone can use. It's much worse than Radiant Greninja, but Radiant Greninja is going away. Then everybody can use Cycling Road versus Radiant. I guess everybody used Radiant Greninja anyway. But maybe this is our Pokestop alternative in the eyes of the Pokemon Company. And then for Dark Acceleration, yeah, we don't have Dark Patch anymore, and we're probably not going to get that back in the immediate term. But Pokemon might think, hey, you guys got Janine's Secret Art that lets you accelerate 2 energy from your deck, and if your Pokemon in the active gets accelerated, there's poison to it, but you get 2 energy. So that might be the answer that you're looking for. Maybe it's probably not. I think the moral of this story is that when cards go away, do not hold your breath looking for a 1-to-1 equivalent or even a quasi equivalent for what that function was to come back. Sometimes it comes back nerfed, sometimes it comes back 10 years from now, sometimes it never comes back, and sometimes it might come back even better. So time will tell where these cards are going to be, and if we get similar functions to what those cards were. But I would not hold my breath on getting exact equivalents on those coming back as soon as rotation happens. Strategic TCG asks, do you think expanded format deserves to return to the Pokemon TCG in terms of Pokemon trading card game live? Would the online client benefit from having an additional full format? First off, shout outs to Strategic TCG, who's on the come up on YouTube. I'll go and put a link, or I'll put their name on YouTube here so you can see them and follow them. And they're on the way doing some good stuff for Pokemon, so check them out. And yeah, should expanded come back? Well, we already know it's on the way. Pokemon have said time and time again that the goal for Pokemon TCG Live is to have expanded format in there in its entirety. Right now, we have a nerfed version of it because they don't have all of the cards working. So we have this nerfed version of expanded that's only Sun and Moon format. I guess theoretically they could renege on that promise. It wouldn't be the first time that a video game developer has reneged on promises and features that they initially promised. But I do think that at some point, the Pokemon Company will add expanded in proper to Pokemon TCG Live. And I mean, deserve is kind of a weird word because I don't necessarily think about it in terms of deserve. But in short, yes, expanded mode should be in the Pokemon Trading Card Game Live. It is one of the main modes, and I know the Pokemon Company haven't been supporting it in the same way as standard format with in-person events and in Pokemon TCG Live, but the reality is there's always going to be a market for people who want to play with their older cards. Rotation be damned, I want to play my old cards, and I totally get it. Even though I'm someone who doesn't play expanded, I do have cards that have rotated out, and yeah, I would love to play Mew VMAX again. But yeah, one thing that I do want to bring up to this discussion is that back in the day, I made a subject about what modes people were playing. And here I've got the Pokemon PTCGO leaderboards, and this is the standard format. And we can see there's 57,000 players on the leaderboard at that given time. Now we're in expanded format, and we go all the way to the back, 89,000. So orders of magnitude, more people at the time were playing expanded format over standard. And despite the fact that even when I made this video, expanded format was kind of on the side, and standard format was the thing that Pokemon have been pushing seriously, there's going to be a market for people who want to play their older cards. This one comes from Faded Jade, who asks, what route do you think would be best for Miraidon players post-2025 rotation once they lose attackers like Raikou V and Zapdos boosting attacks? With these questions, it's always weird, and I know I'm going to get this question a lot for insert deck. What happens to this deck after rotation? And the answer is we don't know. No one knows. All of these decks, whether it is Miraidon, which is losing a bunch of attackers, Gardevoir is losing the Kirlia engine, Charizard is losing support Pokemon like your Lumineon and your Rotom. Ultimately, we don't know what's going to happen to these decks post-rotation. I think Charizard looks like one that's going to be relatively intact post-rotation because you're keeping the Charizard and the Pidgeot, but there could be a brand new grass deck that absolutely obliterates everything, including Charizard, making Charizard unplayable. Ultimately, we don't know what's going to happen to these decks going forward, and over again, we've proven that we don't know. I think in going into the last rotation, we all thought Gardevoir was cooked because it was losing a lot of its attackers like the baby Gardevoir and Zacian V, and then it turns out Gardevoir is still amazing in the new format with the likes of Drifloon and Screamtail and the Monkey Dory really pushing things over the top. So ultimately, we don't know where any of these decks are going to go, Miraidon or otherwise, post-rotation. But if I had to guess based on where things are right now and what could potentially be in play for a Miraidon deck going forward, I think one of the cards we have to look at is Pikachu EX, where it's a 200 it's a basic 200 HP, but it does have the ability Tenacious Heart, where if this Pokemon has full HP and would be knocked out by damage from an attack, it isn't knocked out and its remaining HP becomes 10 instead. So this is a tanky 210 HP Pokemon as long as people aren't circumventing it with things like Roaring Moon's Frenzy Gouging or setting up damage with like a Monkey Dory or something beforehand. And then its attack is insane. For a Grass, Lightning, and Metal, does 300 damage, and you discard 3 energy from this Pokemon. And you could also, so Miraidon could set up the Pikachu, it also could set up the Magnemite, which could then lead to the Magneton, where you can attach 3 basic energy cards from your discard pile to your Lightning Pokemon in any way you want. And if you use this ability, this Pokemon's knocked out. Yes, you give up a prize, but then you can swing for another 300 300 with Pikachu EX. Now, I don't necessarily know if that's the ideal way to play Pikachu EX with the Magneton. There are a bunch of ways of reducing this energy cost or covering this energy cost across multiple turns, but Pikachu EX and Magneton could be cards that we see in a future Miraidon deck. Again, I'm not a psychic. We only know what we know. I know people are going to continue asking about, like, what deck is going to survive rotation? What deck? And like, what deck is, how are these decks going to look like going forward? I think Gardevoir is a big question mark. What happens with Kirlia? Do you just sub in the new Zoroark EX, which technically has the same ability, but now you have a bulky EX that's also a stage 1 that you can't attack with also in the deck? And I don't know. And I think that it's not going to stop people from asking these questions, but ultimately we just don't know where things are going. The Pikachu and the Magneton may or may not be in the deck. I think that time will tell. So we will rest our pretty little heads until we have a better idea. UD96 asks, which deck do you recommend for Palkia V-Star players once it goes out of rotation? This one's actually kind of funny because at the time I'm recording this, we kind of got a Palkia V-Star alternative. Now, it's not what you're thinking. Maybe it is what you're thinking because you've had days, but it's maybe not like the big EX Pokemon that's going to be the equivalent. It's actually Skeledirge, and it's a fire Pokemon, and it has the attack Flare Recital, which does 60 damage and 20 more damage for each bench Pokemon, both yours and your opponent's. This is exactly Palkia V-Star's attack. Now, the attack is, we know this attack is really strong. The pros of this on Skeledirge versus Palkia is that Skeledirge is a single prize Pokemon. Single prize Pokemon hitting for upwards of 260 damage. This is ridiculous. The cons of this is that this is a stage 2 deck, and having to set up multiple stage 2s to keep this potential onslaught rolling seems very tough, and getting the energy on there is going to be really tricky as well. With Magma Basin going away, maybe you're playing Crispin the whole time, but then you're going to run into issues of like, what if you need your supporter card for something else? So I'm not sure what the potential ceiling is for Skeledirge as its standalone deck. But it's kind of funny that you asked this question when this is basically the Palkia V-Star of the Scarlet and Violet era for now. I wouldn't be surprised if we see this attack come up again on another Pokemon at some point. But for the time being, post-rotation, this one seems to be the only one with it. If I were to recommend a deck to Palkia V-Star players that are looking for a similar playstyle, I think that the deck to get is Terapagos EX. It does damage based on the amount of Pokemon on your bench. It's not your opponent's bench, just your bench. But the Terapagos deck does some really cool things with the Pidgeot and the Hoot being able to cherry pick cards that you're looking for. Sets up really nicely with the Fan Rotom. And of late, I've been very impressed with the Dusk Noir version of it, where you're doing additional damage with the Dusk Noir, and yeah, you lose a prize in the process, but oftentimes you're able to take extra KOs in places where you normally wouldn't, with the Dusk Noir softening things up for Terapagos to land the big hit. This is definitely one to keep on your radar once Palkia rotates, because it's got a similar play style in the way that it attacks. It also does crazy damage, and also kind of gives you the old Palkia vibes with the Noctowl and the Pidgeot. Makes you feel like you're playing the Inteleon line and Shady Dealings, which was probably peak Palkia in like 2022, which is fantastic. So really excited for what Terapagos can do in the future. And for Palkia players, this might be the wave going forward. Confuzzled asks, do you ever enter online tournaments yourself as well? The answer right now is no. The online tournaments are long. They also happen to run. I know like the late night series, when they do them once a week, they have like a European time zone one and a Western hemisphere version of it as well. And the timing commitment to tournaments is long. And I, as a husband and a father of a toddler, do not have that kind of time to commit to sitting in front of this computer for hours and playing in a tournament. And yeah, it's not that long if I suck and I lose and I just get eliminated really quickly, but you're playing ideally to go as far in the tournament as I can, and just the responsibilities as an adult and as a parent don't really align with grinding the tournament scene like that. Like even in-person tournaments. Last year I went to Toronto Regionals, which was amazing, and I had to do my training was like me playing games against myself after my son had gone to bed, playing in the dark with my cell phone light pointing down at the table, and I was just playing games against myself. Like, it was really tough to find the time to even just get comfortable with the cards, because up until that point I'd been playing almost entirely digitally, and it was a process. And this year the Toronto Regionals is unfortunately happening like right before Christmas, and the month of December is a complete write-off for me. Just our social calendar is just completely slammed in on every weekend day, and I just wouldn't have time to like go to the event, and not even just go to the event, but just train for the event and do the testing that I would want to do. So playing this game in that way is really tough. And even just going to locals is a process for me, of like having to then coordinate with my wife of like, hey, I'm not gonna be home from for these hours on this weeknight, and my wife also works full time, and then she has to go and watch the kid, and then I'm off playing games. So it can be a real challenge to find the time to be the very best and compete at any level. The way that this channel operates is that I do a live stream on Sunday morning, and Sunday morning's a very specific time slot for me, because my wife and my son are asleep for a big chunk of that time, so I'm not interrupting family time. And then I edit all of that stuff on Sunday night after my son goes to bed, and that's pretty much all the time I have to commit to this channel. And it's not a lot, but then I have that. I record and then edit everything for the week in that one day. And it's like less than a work day of stuff that I have to find the way of like recording it and positioning in a way that it still makes sense once we get to like Friday. So that's pretty much the time that works for me for even just like making this content. But finding the time to actually go to a store and play, or participate in an in-person tournament, or even just participate in an online tournament just does not align with the realities of being an adult, at least at this point in my life. Are there any other Poke parents or Poke adults here that can relate to the struggle that it is playing the game, and even like just playing Pokemon TCG live? And sometimes I can't even find time to pick up my phone and just play some practice matches with a new deck without my little one just like crawling on my lap, and now he wants to look at pictures of pictures that we took throughout the day, stuff like that. So even just finding the time to play can be difficult. So for anyone that can relate, let me know in the comments what your experience is like with finding a balance between enjoying this card game that we love, and the balance between that and the responsibilities of being an adult human being. I would love to hear your feedback. There we go. That is going to do it for this round of Q&A. Thank you so much to everybody that submitted your questions. If you've got any other questions you'd like to ask for a future video, feel free to leave it in this thread. I did look back at the previous thread, and I think I pulled at least one from that thread out to here, and I'll put up a new thread in the next time we do this in the community section of YouTube, so you can get your I can review your question, and maybe it'll end up in the next video. But for now, I gotta get going. Thank you so much for watching. You can find me on all the things: YouTube, TikTok, Twitter, and Instagram at InThirdPerson. You can find me on Twitch at InThirdPerson, where I stream the Pokemon trading card game every Sunday at 10 a.m. Eastern Time. And check out the website inthirdperson.com for more articles and videos on video games, board games, and other nerdy pursuits. So until the next one, I'll see you later. Bye-bye.